Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Show Up with Cameron Gran. I am your host, Cameron Gran. As a reminder, I'm not a therapist. I'm just somebody going on his own mental health journey, trying to give you little tips and tricks that you can use on yourself. So just, try things. I encourage you just to listen, because sometimes we try things and we're like, oh, this really works, and sometimes we try them and we're like, oh, this doesn't work for me. And that's fine, because the first step of any kind of journey is advocating for yourself, because only you know how your brain actually works, because the rest of it is like, sure, neuroscientists know like what the inside of the brain, but like we know how our brain feels, and we also know when our brain is trying to trick us. And we think that we don't know, but in reality, the more that you dive in, the more mindful you are about the way your brain works, the more you get surprised when you're like, oh, I didn't realize that I was on a track for being depressed, until all of a sudden you just shoot me with a bunch of like depressive thoughts. Thank you, brain. Today, because I am super behind in schoolwork and other videos, I thought I would just chill and reassess, because I have finally started the part of my schooling where it's like more focused into my actual like degree program that I want to do. And I thought that would mean like I would understand more. But I'm kind of in a place where I'm like, I don't want to consider myself stupid. Nobody wants to think that, but like I'm in like an overload point where it's like, oh, I don't understand like 3/4 of what was just said to me. And then like it's just very interesting because I'm in online school. And you're like, oh, well, usually I can follow videos and understand what they're saying pretty accurately. And now I'm watching and I'm like, I don't know if they made these videos with my brain in mind. Because I'm somebody who is a visual learner and can do reading, but I'm somebody who needs to understand how something works to actually do it correctly, or even start doing it. Because it's like, oh, if you show me something that you're doing, because like the copy and paste thing, sometimes some schools do it where you like copy something that you've done and then you just do that, and it's like a repetitive learning. It's kind of what Rosetta Stone does, where you're just rapidly being shown something and you piece together a language over time. My brain is so pattern based and understanding what the pattern is that I can skip over the language part, so it's a trap. And right now, my school's trying to do like, oh, we showed you, now do it. And I'm like, well, you showed me, but you didn't explain what the purpose of this is. And so now I'm like, well, you're not with me doing the assignment, and now I have no clue if this is a good spot to like do what you want, or if it's going to mess with the program, because I am in school for visual effects and CGI, and right now we're diving into like putting tracks down in a scene where it's like, well, if you watch Marvel and like only a certain part of the set is real, the rest of it is CGI. And to do that, they put trackers down around the main set, and I'm doing the tracking part of where you place the tracker down, so that way when you put in the CGI, it looks like it blends in with the real set cohesively. At least that's what I think I'm learning this week or this month, but I'm not sure, again, because I don't understand. So that's kind of my update about school, but it's mostly why I am doing this from inside of a vehicle instead of in my normal spot, because I'm at work right now, and after I get off work, I need to buckle down and do a bunch of schoolwork because I'm behind, and I need to meet with people, and then I have other things later in the evening, and yeah, it just isn't a good day for me. So I'm just trying to do as much as I can with the time I have. Normally, I have a break, and my break today is kind of early, so I have more time than I think. The only problem is I'm trying to double down on my attempts to be more healthy, and I realize, because I am so dehydrated, that I have been tricking my body into thinking that I'm very, very hungry, when in fact I think I'm very, very thirsty. So to challenge that, I'm like, well, instead of eating every time you have a break, just you choose a lunch break, and that's next time you eat, because you did eat breakfast. Because I have been operating on like, oh, every time we stop, we put something in our mouths, and that's a very unhealthy thing to do. Don't do that. Don't follow me. And it's just been very interesting. I am trying to change the way I look at things, because again, if you do something for a certain amount of time, it's kind of like you've trained your brain to act a certain way. And I have been doing what I've been doing for so long, sometimes I fall into old patterns because I go into autopilot because I'm not being mindful. Yeah. And so when you fall into autopilot, you just start doing what you used to do, and then it's like after work, and then you're like, oh, I had made a plan to stop doing this, but I wasn't paying attention and I wasn't thinking for so long that I just barely came back into my own body and realized, what have I been doing? I mean, obviously I'm paying attention and I'm driving and I'm safe. That like, but what I mean is like, you're, it's autopilot because you're not like holding yourself accountable. You're not actually paying 100% attention to like yourself, because I'm paying 100% attention on the road and making sure people are safe, but I'm not like holding myself accountable. I guess that's mostly what this is about, is accountability, because mindfulness allows you to catch thoughts as they happen and then challenge them. But I've been so out of my own thoughts recently that I haven't caught the tricky thoughts that have been happening. And I have definitely noticed that I've been falling back a little bit because I don't understand social cues. And when I don't understand them, I start going into like over analytical. And something that helped me is if I just started talking to people and then telling them where I'm at, rather than trying to force my way into their mind to become a mind reader. And so something, because I'm in an improv group, and something that was said that I don't know if it was meant in a negative way, but like as a cautionary thing, is like, I'm a very encouraging person. I want everyone to succeed in improv. And something that I do sometimes, because I have to lay out what happened so you understand the context for my question. Because otherwise, if I don't think you understand the context of my question, I'm questioning myself if I explain myself correctly. And so I guess the way I do that can come across as me coaching people. And now I have to like start off improv. Like, I don't. Nobody said that they're upset with me, but now I'm going to have like tell them that like, if I do this thing, it's not me trying to like guide you or do any of that stuff. If you have questions, sure, I'll answer them. It's me trying to verify the circumstances behind what is behind, like, the meaning of my question. And if you guys can confirm that we were both there and we saw like this thing happen, then I can go on and ask what I actually want to ask. And I need to stop questioning other people. And to stop doing that, you just have to be like, hey, this is the thing I'm doing. I'm trying to listen to myself and catch myself if it starts sounding like I'm coaching. But if you hear that, I want you to know I'm never trying to like guide people. I'm never trying to take control. It's me just trying to explain enough circumstances to actually ensure that my question is actually the thing being answered. But it's just something that happens with my brain, is like, if I don't feel solid in the foundation of who I am, all of a sudden I have to like check in a lot more. And if that's happening, in order to stop that, I do have to be more vocal, because that's how I advocate for myself. Because advocacy is kind of like doing the things that makes you stop questioning yourself, is kind of what I need to advocate for. And yes, it might come across as me like, I worry sometimes when I do this that it makes me seem like I'm overly emotional. And don't get me wrong, I probably am more emotional than people that you know. And that might be a bit negative for you, I'm sorry, but that's who I am, and I'm willing to accept that without judgment, because that is also one of the like beginning steps you have to take to actually begin your mental health journey, is like, this is part of me. I can look at it as a negative, or I can just look at it as, oh, this thing is here to stay. And if it's here to stay, then I need to make sure I accept it, and then we work with it rather than try to find a way around it. Because when you avoid things, that's when they start festering. And festering is never good, because it makes you think that you're being better than you are. It's like, oh, I'm at a further step in my journey than I actually am, because I'm avoiding all the things that would set me back on my journey. Whereas if you actually want to be at the actual step you think you are, then you need to acknowledge the thing in the moment, address it, and then move past it. And I think I should have done this last week when this was brought to my attention, what I'm talking about with my improv group. But another thing when you talk about advocating for yourself is, a lot of times you don't want to be the person that like, I don't want to be the person that like mellows the group or make people unhappy. But I don't think what I had to say would have made people unhappy. It would have made them aware of my circumstances. Um, Ironically, this is also the last week on Monday was my anniversary of my mother's funeral. I talked about it on this. And I did tell people in group that that might be why I was kind of off. Um, and I don't know if that's where that thing was getting perceived as came from, was just because I was off because of my mom. But I don't think that being in a negative mind space means that your treatment of others is no longer your problem, because you should always have accountability no matter what you're doing or what you're thinking or what you're saying. My problem is sometimes I don't hear myself or see myself the way that other people see me, and I'm trying to work on that, because the benefit of acting and being in that kind of thing is when you're acting, I can kind of be like, oh well, this is what the thing that's needed for the script. This is how it's perceived by others, and so you kind of have a benchmark of how extreme or how little you need to be about certain things. And that's something that I realize is it's like, oh, I could be really, really aggressive, or I could take it down to like a 2. Because there's like in emotions, there's like a 1 and a 10 when it comes to film. And one of the things that bothers me in film is like, usually a movie only has one level 10. If it has more than 10, like if it has more than one 10, it's usually at different stages of the film. But then even then, I feel like in storytelling, you need to choose which 10 matters more. Because otherwise, the gravity of whatever that 10 is loses its weight on a viewer if you're always at 10. And it's kind of the same thing in improv. It's like, oh, well, if you choose whether or not your character's happy, sad, mad, afraid, you choose one of those 4 things, and then if your character is always at a 10, then there's no like line going. And there are levels, things can get kind of flat, but that's kind of the same thing with like if we translate a scene into reality. A lot of times when we're at a 10, everything is shown through that filter, and so it's like a flat way of experiencing the world. Like I feel like it's when we're at our most bitter is when we're at the most emotionally heightened. And I say that bitter because it's like everything is like, this is the reality. Like we have less flexibility when it comes to like trying to listen to other people. It's like, oh, it's originally this bad, or it's not going to happen at all. It's something that I think that our brain does to protect ourselves. But when we're at like a level 10, it's hard to wind down while we feel threatened. And for me, a huge thing that helped me when I'm at a 10 is just reminding myself that like things aren't permanent. Life has these like fluctuating moments, and it only continues to be a 10 the more that we resist the fact that it is one. It's like one of those things where like if you pretend that you're fine when you're really upset, it's not really the truth. It's like, oh, hey, I'm really upset, but I want to pretend that I'm like the best version of myself that I am. And so what happens is that, like, one of the examples, if you watch the show Friends, it's like when Monica wants to be like the perfect host for people, she never tells people that's what she wants to be. So what that ends up happening is like in one of the episodes, they switch rooms with Rachel and Monica switch rooms with Joey and Chandler. And then Monica wants to be the host, but like Joey and Chandler now have the big apartment. So instead of telling people that she still wants to host people, she's like, oh, no, I'll just clean this entire floor that was the guy's apartment, and then bake cookies and like do everything that's like I'm now the inviting host, but I won't acknowledge the fact that I need this from other people, because then that means something's wrong, and nothing's wrong. I'm fine with not being the host, but I'm going to put all this energy into being the host because I don't want to acknowledge that that's what I want. And that's kind of one of the big things. It's like, oh, if we don't acknowledge something, it has more power over us. Whereas if we do acknowledge it, it doesn't. For instance, a huge breakthrough, and I might have said this before on this channel, but a huge breakthrough that I had when I was in group was the fact that, like, some people might change and never think about um, suicide. And I think, well, good for you. For me, what was the judgment free thing that I brought up was when I realized, oh, my problem isn't that I think about suicide, it's that I judge myself for doing that. And that judgment is what festers it into becoming more than an idea. And that is something of why I find the stigma of talking about it to be a problem, or the fact that I had a question in my brain before I said it, because this goes also on YouTube, about whether or not I should say it, because then the algorithm blocks it because you're saying it. But blocking it is in my opinion, adding to the stigma, because the more we try to forget certain subjects, the more that they fester in our brain. And that's my breakthrough, was that, oh, I'm somebody who thinks about this every single day. And I can either judge myself for thinking about it every single day, or I can say thank you. And that sounds weird to say, but it's like, oh, I'm thinking about this. Thank you for letting me know that something is off. Instead of hating that thought for appearing, it's kind of like you give it a hug and then you say, but that's not what I want. But thank you for letting me know something's wrong. I will try to figure out what's off. But knowing that, like, now I'm considering this opens the door for me trying to find a better solution. And turning it from a negative into kind of an accepting hug kind of made it lose a lot of its power. And don't get me wrong, like, sometimes I have really bad days, and that idea seems even more tempting. But even then, I still try to take it with with grace, because I know something's off, and I know that today is not how every single day is going to be. And when you're struggling, it can feel like every single day of your life is going to be this particular way. No matter what you do, it's never going to change. Like, those are all negative thoughts that, like, fuel us, because there's a judgment happening. Because I'm like, well, if this is today, then tomorrow's going to be the same. And, like, so it's also anxiety coming, because then you're like, oh, every day is like this. How can I prevent this from continuing? It's like, I don't know what it is about my brain, but it's like the more I think about something, the more power it has over me. Especially when I start planning about how to fix it. Whereas if I'm just like, okay, let's just do actions. Like, I started this off by talking about schoolwork. I am severely behind in that, and that does worry me. But I'm also avidly trying to understand, because I feel like it's a building block for future classes. And I've reached out to the teacher. I've reached out to the starter of the program, because I'm like, hey, I have watched these videos. I've rewatched them. Something's not clicking, and I am trying to meet up with a tutor and my teacher. But I'm not doing the work. It's taking me so long to understand it, because it's not explained in my style, in the sense that I need to know how something functions for me to actually get how to do it myself. And previous classes, they've actually shown oh, we want you to do this, and then and then if you do this, it does this to the object, and that's what we want, because we want solid lines, make sure it looks more like a 3D space object, rather than really being flat and kind of more 2D. I don't know. I'm glossing over things because I'm not trying to teach you about my very complicated computer visual effects degree that I'm trying to get. But even this, I've had people question about, why do you want to do this? And it's because we all have a dream for ourselves and what we want. And the reasoning I wanted this degree was because I want to make an epic film. I mean, not oh yeah, it's epic, but something along the lines of Lord of the Rings, or more. I mean, I don't want to make a sci-fi film, but Avatar. The reason why Avatar is what it was is because James Cameron not only developed a lot of the software, but he went in and developed more about how CGI works, because what he wanted specifically done, it couldn't happen in the beginning iterations of that movie. And so he was like, okay, so how can I redesign not only how we film this, but how to improve the way CGI works so that it can actually give me the results that I want for my project. And that's kind of more where I got inspired, is because I have this big movie that I want to do, and I have the idea for it, but I want to be able to explain it coherently to animators and visual effects artists, myself, because the more that you have like language to communicate, the closer something gets to your vision. Because that's something that happened in my film Ashes. Is I've done horror movies before in the past, but that was the one that I felt was the most aligned with what I wanted it to be. I mean, obviously, it could like things could have improved if I had more money, but with no money and just working with people that I know, having the collaborative brain of being like, this is your talent set. These are like the sketches of what I want from this character. Can you do this? And then if like, and then because I was talking, this is makeup specifically, and then if the makeup couldn't do what I wanted, then I was like, okay, what thing can you do that's like this? So I can kind of have like a makeup and visual effects things working at the same time, and that really improved the quality of that work because even like outside of makeup, like just even like the directing of that felt a lot better because I was working and helping and being like collaborated on such like a good level because I feel like when you start with film at all, I feel like there's a very like ownership heavy approach where like we have to own our work and so we don't want other people to influence it. But I find that the more somebody questions what I'm doing, the more doors open up in my brain to know whether or not I need. It's like I did the film The Flyaway Girl, and there are moments in that film that I was questioned about, and some of them were warranted because I am a guy, I'm not a girl, and there were things that were questioned. And I was like, okay, this is something that doesn't make sense from the female perspective, and I think I did change it because I was like, oh, I'll change it so it makes more sense in that context. Because I do have sisters, so I'm aware of a lot of stuff, but I'm not, in fact, a woman. So like, I don't know everything that they go through or like every single fear, and then I'm like, okay, so you like over the topness. Is this have to be a 10 or is like because that's something I debated in that film also is like what point of the film is a level 10, and that was something that was brought up to one of the actresses because she thought like the ending would be the 10, and I was like, no, this is the level 10 because this is the true moment. The ending is the reveal that we missed this moment going on, and so but she still didn't agree, so I was like, well, let's do the level 10 first and then I'll watch what you think should happen after. And I think that's a great thing to do on set is like we all have sets for a certain amount of time in film, so the best thing you can do is like, okay, I have this idea. Let's make sure that because it's my film that we get like what I want, and I know that I have those shots down. But I want to make sure that I leave time so I can try things the way that you want them. Because maybe I am wrong, and I like what you're saying. I do agree with a lot of what you're saying, and so let's film those things so I have them. Because who knows, when I get into the editing room, maybe your version of how it should be done is the better version. And that's kind of what I like about it is like The Office is kind of very similar where like they get the shots that they want done first, and then like that's when they had the addition of adding improv in. But as long as they had the main story down, or like, well, let's do the same thing. You guys know the beats of the scene, but let's just have improv instead of trying to match the lines. And I think that what that does is it deepens your understanding of your character, and so that you can actually make good improv decisions because they're based on the actual character, not just like what's funny. Because comedy isn't always about going for the joke; it's about either reacting or allowing space for a previous joke to land harder. And that's something that I feel like is also good in life because sometimes happiness isn't about chasing happiness. Sometimes happiness is about accepting where you're at and allowing happiness to happen in the moment. But if happiness isn't happening, we're not trying to clench it and never let it go, because then what's happening is we feel like happiness is something that's already fleeting, it's gone, and it's only ever going to be a nostalgic thing that we possess. It's not going to be something that's going to happen again in the future. And that's something that was really helpful for me to understand is like, oh, I can accept this limitation or I can let it grow, but I don't have to cling to something that isn't working. And just because something isn't working anymore doesn't mean that it wasn't working at the time that you had it, because we all change over time. We're not the same people that we used to be, and change is a part of life, and that's okay. And that was hard for me to grasp for a very long time, is that people that I care about might not be the same people that they were when we first started hanging out anymore. And them no longer being people that I need them to be doesn't mean that they're not good people, but just because they're not bad people doesn't mean that they're good for you. And that was very helpful. And my friend is the one that kind of got me to see that, because I love very hard the people that I care about. And so it's very hard for me to cut ties with people, especially when I haven't perceived like something that's so dire that we can no longer be friends. But there are things that can kind of be problematic that we let go, and we say it's for the sake of a friendship, but then if all we have is the problematic behavior, then it's not really a friendship. You're just accepting less than your worth. Like, if, how do I say this? If that problematic behavior is like 10% of the friendship, I don't think it's a big deal. If it's 90%, or if like the majority of the time it's not like that, then I think that it's okay to let that go. But it is hard. And I used to judge myself a lot for being like, I don't know if I can be this. And then I had to check in and be like, okay, so how do you feel when you're around them? How do you feel when you're not? And is being around them better than being not around them? And I feel like once you know the answer to that, it helps with acceptance. Because I think that I really think that you really need to emphasize the power of acceptance, because they even have a phrase that's called rational acceptance, which is just that we all have these dark parts of ourselves, we all have these good parts of ourselves, and you can't really avoid one or the other. You just have to accept that all of those parts make you you. Not to always bring up Inside Out 2, but that's definitely the beauty of the end of the film, where instead of them trying to limit these new emotions, they just accepted that they are all part of Riley. And then Riley, instead of going back to her previous self, Joy had to like rip out and accept it, like the fact that there is no going backwards. You are now this new person. And so allowing Riley to not only call the shots of what her core beliefs are, but also to not judge any of the emotions that are present, I think is a beautiful lesson. But it also is definitely like hand in hand with like how DBT and mental health works, which is just that I think that we all have things that we expect from ourselves, and part of those things can come from things that we're taught as children, and some of the things are things that we saw that we don't want to do ourselves. And knowing that what we value is huge, because then when we're challenged or things come up, we can be like, hey, I can see all these people partaking in something, and all these people say that it's fine. I can join the party, which is like, I guess, peer pressure, or I can know who I am at my core and be like, no, I don't care how many people I see do this kind of stuff. I don't want to do it, so I'm not going to allow them to pressure me into doing it. Now, what I will say is, like, part of the balancing scale that you learn is that nobody's ideals or values is more valuable than somebody else. And so when you know that, you kind of are like, oh, okay. So if this person, when I tell them that this boundary that I don't want to cross pushes me and keeps trying after I've told them that I have this boundary, then that's when you have to reanalyze and figure out whether or not it's somebody you want in your life. Because it's different if somebody's like having fun and they're like pressuring you like in a fun way, and then once you've told them that you don't want to and they continue, that's kind of when you're like, okay, well, we're not really friends. I'm more of somebody here for your entertainment, because if we were friends and I told you this stuff, you would accept it and just allow us to continue. Sorry, I have a lot of like sunlight on me now, so I look kind of golden. This just happened, but that's something that I struggle with a lot sometimes, is just the fact that I don't know where I sit with friends sometime, and it can feel very like, I don't, there's a term for it, but I can't think of it right now, where it feels very, I guess, needy if you keep asking them for validation, which is why I decided to seek out validation from myself and not from those around me, social media, anything else, because when you have your values, that's when you can catch people who are like, when you have your values, that's when you can check whether or not someone or something is actually trying to gaslight you, or they're just trying to make you believe what they believe. It's like when you have a solid foundation, it's harder for people to shake you. And like I have an open mind. Like I will listen to people, but I have learned, especially in improv group, that I don't present as somebody who has an open mind. And I'm trying to figure out how to change that because I am somebody who like will listen to people. I want to see people succeed. I value other people. But apparently my face gives I don't care. I don't know how to change. Well, I don't know how to change that, but I'm looking to, because it is amazing to me how many times people call me like how many times people have called me judgmental when all I've ever done is like listen to them and try to hear where they're coming from and like what's going on in their life, because that doesn't seem very judgmental to me. That seems like very accepting of somebody else and like the way they're at. And the reason I thought something was wrong with me is because people kept telling me that I wasn't the norm. And what I have since realized in my 29 years of life is somebody else's norm is not your norm. When you move, like if you move to New York, the first thing you're going to experience when you're surrounded by millions of people is that the way you perceive life is not the only way of going about it. I cannot tell you, growing up in a small town, mostly Mormon, which means also mostly white, how going from that town to New York was like, oh, this is how other people live. And it was also like, there are things that I was exposed to that I was like, oh, I knew that this was a thing because I've watched enough movies and I'd followed enough things on social media to realize certain things existed. But then to see it in reality when you're like, oh, this is just something that's like a story that we teach through film or story. But no, it's not like something that's in the past. It's not something that no longer exists. It's something that's present, and you can see it if you look for it and if you step aside of your community. Because like there's a thing called an echo chamber that I had to learn, was like, because I was so outside of it, that I felt like something was wrong with me. And it was because I was in an environment where everyone thought the same way. And when everyone thinks the same way and you're trying to be like, well, I don't feel that way and I don't feel accepted and those kind of things, I really had to find my own community and then be like, there's nothing wrong with the community that I left, but it is not my community because I would never be accepted there. And that made me feel worthless and like really ill. And I tried to change and stuff like that, but then it was like, oh, well, I'm not the problem. Just because I don't fit into your ideal of what you think people should be doesn't mean I am an issue. It means that you aren't. It's so funny to me because I am somebody who believes in God. I'm agnostic. I struggle with religion sometimes because so many teachings are like, let's accept others and like judge, like you shouldn't judge others. I guess golden rule is treat others how you want to be treated, and then like he who is without sin should throw the first stone or something like that. But like judgment itself is, humans do it all the time, and something that I like was drilled into me as a kid is that judgment is not for humanity. Judgment is for God. That's a teaching that I was taught as a really young age. And so I get bothered sometimes when I'm like, why are you throwing how you feel about somebody else that you don't know and you've never experienced them in real life when you don't know what happens in the day-to-day for them? And that's how I've always been. I'm like, well, even if I disagree or I don't want to partake in the things that you want to do, I don't think you're problematic. I don't think you're an issue. It's just I don't want to do those things, and we can still have a friendship and like just find where our circles intertwine, you know, in that like that pie wheel thing where like, oh, this is Cameron, this is your friend, and in the middle in like the little like oh gosh, shapes. This is a diamond that's rounded. I don't know what that's called. In the middle part, what is wrong with you today? Sorry. My communication is going out the door. So I guess that means I probably should wrap this up. But like the whole point of today was just like that we all have different stages of acceptance and DBT and mindfulness that we're on. And hopefully I reiterated some of the beginning steps you can take to open that journey for you. Because self-acceptance, rational acceptance, non-judgment, just allowing both sides of yourself to exist and allowing like yourself to find your core beliefs and sticking to them while still maintaining an open mind is okay. Because like I have friends that I don't agree with at all, but I'll still listen to them and try to understand their perspective. And the only time I have a problem with it is when I've extended that courtesy and it's not returned, because I do believe in the golden rule. Is like, if you're talking and then it's my turn to talk, you should be listening to my side and forgetting yourself. And then once I've finished, then you can start talking to me. But like, you should be 100% focused in what I'm talking to when that's happening. And it's kind of how I've always been about my things throughout life. Is like, I will have a point to talk and I give an opinion, but right now I want to make sure that I listen and understand your perspective. And if I don't, I need to give context of like what misled me, and then we can get on the same page. So hopefully you guys enjoyed today's episode. I really appreciate it. I will see you guys next time, and thank you guys so much. As a reminder, when you go throughout the week, don't forget to take a moment, take a breath, breathe in, breathe out, just as long as you remember to show up for yourself, because you matter.